Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So grateful to be the guest speaker this morning. I am the Cowardly Lion, if you haven't guessed it yet, although the costume said Macho Lion. But I'm no longer the Cowardly Lion because I've received my Medal of Courage, right? Pretty cool, huh? And so I'm here as a guest speaker. I've started a motivational speaking career. A new series of books called Wake Up and Roar. So are you ready to roar this morning? So I've got Wake Up and Roar at work, Wake Up and Roar for insomniacs, Wake Up and Roar for teens. I recently watched the new Christopher Guest movie, Mascots, that's about people who dress up like animals and perform at sports. And there's a moose who's written an inspirational book. I loved it. She called it Moosing Grace, How I Found God and Salvation Through Spirituality and Success in Real Estate. I love it. So I'm here to talk with you today about what else but courage. And what the hell is courage anyways? What is it? Anybody? Lots of witches in the crowd. Rambo, any insights?
Rambo.
Yes.
Going out of the comfort zone.
Going out of one's comfort zone. I like that. Yeah. You have to get out of your comfort zone sometimes to realize you're courageous. Yeah. Reverend Audrey.
Rocking on.
Rocking on. Hey, kids. Rocking on. Yes, Chris. I'm sorry?
Going above and beyond.
Going above and beyond. I like that. Dawn.
Power to do what's hard to do.
Power to do what's hard to do. Okay, one more. Yes.
Feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Feeling the fear and doing it anyways. You stole my whole talk. Okay, Cindy, what do you got?
Standing up for something.
Standing up for something. Yeah, if you don't stand up for something, you'll fall for anything. It's been said, right? So for me, my lessons in courage began when I met Dorothy and Tin Man and Scarecrow and the little dog Toto. See, before that moment, I thought I was courageous as could be because I did everything that I was supposed to do in life. I was a great lion, and I tried to follow my father's footsteps. I tried to be who they said I should be, what the world and the rules of the forest say I'm supposed to be. I tried to stand up in that. When I was supposed to roar, I roared. When I was supposed to growl, I growled. And when I was supposed to tuck my tail between my legs, I did, and it wasn't controversial. But maybe you were like me, where you try to fulfill someone else's vision of what you think your life should be. You start to control everything around you, and so it just takes a little something to reveal to you just how scared you really are. You ever find that? You know, for me, sometimes if my favorite TV show isn't on in the right time slot, all of a sudden I freak out. If the smallest bit of traffic shows up where it's not supposed to, I start to freak out. It doesn't take too much sometimes to reveal deep down how afraid we are when we're living our lives in a state of control. And for me, the moment I really realized how afraid I was when I got yelled at by a little girl and her dog. Dorothy, someone who is truly courageous, who embodies virtues and dignity so much so that she's willing to stand up to what she believes is a ferocious lion. So when she stood up to me, I really broke down, and I began to realize just how afraid I really was. But I'll tell you what, as I'm going to share with you keys for practical courage this morning, that the first courageous act I ever did was admitting that I was a coward in that moment. And for me, there can be a great power in admitting we're afraid. And thus, it's my first key to share with you today about what practical courage is. And the first key to practical courage is recognizing that practical courage isn't afraid to be afraid. It isn't afraid of being afraid. See, courage isn't about being macho, although you see the abs?
Yeah.
It's nice to have those, if only for one morning. Courage isn't about being macho. It's not about being unafraid. It's not about being tough. It's not about being in denial. It's not about faking it till you make it. Real courage is about authenticity. Sometimes we can't even step into courage, a greater way of being who we are, if we're in denial of what is taking place. The word courage comes from the French word for heart. Who speaks French? They can tell me, how do you say it? Cœur. It comes from the French word for heart. So to live in courage, to me, is to live from heart. And to live from heart means two different things to me. The first is it means to be authentic. To be courageous is to be authentic. It's not pretending you're not afraid when you're afraid. It's not pretending like everything's okay when it's not okay. It's authentically allowing and honoring how you feel, even if you don't like what it is. To me, to live from heart too, sorry, my paws are getting a little. The other aspect of living from heart is living from, the word I'll use is hope. Because the heart often represents that which is within us, which has yet to show up in full appearance around us. To live from a place of hope is to live from a promise of a greater truth within us, even if it isn't showing up around us. So to live a courageous life is to live from heart, to live with your authenticity, and yet to move on with that in greater hope of what can become in your life. You know, on my journeys with Dorothy and the gang, looking back, I didn't realize it then, but I did a lot of courageous things. I leaped chasms. I faced down flying monkeys. I even confronted the Wicked Witch of the West. But when I was doing those things, I didn't think they were courageous because I was afraid. Now I see that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about moving forward even in spite of one's fears. It's about living in alignment with the heart no matter what is taking place. And this leads me to the second key of practical courage that I want to share with you today. And that is that practical courage is about consistency. That true courage is about consistency. It's about consistently being who you are in your heart and who you can be no matter what is taking place, and allowing nothing around you, even a ferocious lion or a wicked witch, take you away. Anyone know any wicked witches in your life? It's about living from that heart center no matter what and being it consistently. You know, I feel that life demands courage from us, that the world demands courage from us. Why? Because the world has produced us to give back to it what it needs. And what it needs from humanity and what it needs from us is these virtues that are sown within us like seeds from a primordial non-time, a long time ago. And if we are willing to nurture those virtues and bring them to our lives, we're able, through that process and consistency of courage, to help sow those seeds in our lives and in the lives of those around us. In honor of my friend Dorothy, I have the story about another person named Dorothy, a real life woman. Her name is Dorothy Warburton, and she's over 80 years old today. But she has a powerful story to me about living from who you are no matter what circumstances around you tell you to be. And Dorothy was born a girl to a father who really wanted a son. And the father really loved science, and even though he knew his daughter could never be a scientist, he decided to talk science with her anyways. And she really enjoyed it so much so that she won some essay contests when she was in elementary school and got sent some magazines, and was so shocked to see that there were out there women who were studying in a scientific field. But she put that aside and knew that she would probably never be able to be a scientist herself. She would continue going to school, and she would eventually graduate. But even though when she was studying science, she said, I'm going to study typing on the side, and one day maybe fulfill my dream of being a secretary to a great scientist. When she decided to go for her master's degree, she was doing such an amazing job in her work that her professor said, you know what you're doing sounds more like a PhD project to me. So she wound up getting her doctorate. She wound up getting a job at Columbia University where she saw some sexism in play, and so she talked to some of the leaders there and said, why aren't more women on committees? And they replied to her by making her the chair of the refreshment. And so here she is, still not quite believing in herself, but slowly gaining steam. The work that Dorothy committed herself was to studying women who had had miscarriages and problems with reproduction. The guys would often put the women down. They don't want to talk about what happened to them. But Dorothy knew better. She would listen to these women. And through her studies and even her work that she still does today, countless babies have been born because of the work that she dedicated herself to. And talking about courage, putting up with all this crap, she did all this while having 4 kids. It's a pretty amazing thing. Dorothy, she shares, "My life isn't what I thought it would be, certainly when I was younger. But I'm pleased with the way things turned out. I never quite imagined achieving what I've achieved. In fact, I'm not even sure I still imagine it. So I'm going to continue to do good work for as many years as I can, and I don't intend to stop until I have to." And this, to me, is a statement about work, but it's also a statement about virtue. And that, to me, is how we really become who we really can be in our lives, by being consistent to our values, our virtues, and our principles. Not to being know-it-alls, but to practicing our virtues no matter what. And when we do that, to me, we really define what it means to live a courageous life. And what a courageous life is that it not only brings forth a greater aspect of ourselves, but it calls forth our world around us to rise up to those virtues that we are bringing into it. Another courageous woman, Maya Angelou, put it quite exactly. These are some words that she shared just a month or two before her own passing. She said, "Courage is the most important of all the virtues. Courage is the most important of all the virtues. Because without courage, you can't practice any other virtues consistently. You can't be consistently fair, or kind, or generous, or forgiving. Any of these without courage." So courage is about a commitment to your virtues, never allowing a circumstance or another person or anything going out there in the world turn you away from being who you really are. And that answer that we're ever looking for, if there's ever an answer to our problems, it's in bringing forth a greater aspect of ourselves into our lives. A final key to practical courage to share with you. Don't take me too seriously. I'm in a lion outfit up here. A final key. Yep, there's my paws. My paws are still there. It's just 3 of them. See, I know there's palm reading, but is there palm reading? A final key to practical courage is practical faith. Practical courage means practical faith. It means that we don't necessarily drive into situations with an impractical faith, trying to ask God to save us from any danger. Practical faith also means that we're not impractically trying to fake it till we make it in our lives. Practical faith means that we show up to be present for something divine and sacred when it's most hard, when it's most difficult. You ever see a situation on the news or in your life and say, "I don't see God in that. I don't see good in that"? Well, for me, that's even more of a reason to show up and be a presence for God to show up in your vision, for something divine and sacred to show up in you. That's what practical faith is. That's what practical courage is. On the page I didn't grab, there's a quote from Paul Tillich. He says that practical courage, I'm paraphrasing, is the courage to be rooted in the God who appears when God has disappeared in the anxiety of doubt. The courage to be rooted in the God who appears when God has disappeared in the anxiety of the doubt. See, I don't think there's such thing as a God of fear. I don't believe in a God of anxiety. I don't believe in a God of ego, and a God of hatred, and a God of misgivings. So when I am in that place, I cannot find God, because there is no God to find. But I do believe in a God of love, and a God of a capital T, truth, and a God of wholeness, and a God of dignity, and a God of purpose. And when I can remember that God, even when I've been fooled or tricked into being or believing I am less than who I really am, I am truly standing in courage. Courage demands at times that we are the light in the darkness. We should never seek it from anywhere outside ourselves, but to show up, to be willing to be a light, a crack in a bad situation, to allow that light to get in. This was the great Martin Luther King Jr.'s experience one evening after being awoken by a phone call from a murderous voice that said that he was going to bomb his house if he didn't stop his civil rights work. This scared the hell out of King, and he began to march back and forth in his kitchen, and he finally sat down and he began to pray. He said to his Lord, "I am here taking a stand for what I believe is right, but now I am afraid. The people are looking for me for leadership, and if I stand before them without strength and courage, they too will falter. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone." Anyone ever been here before? Been in that moment? That's a practical courage to me, not to try and make God be anything at all, but to show up and look a situation directly in the face, be honest about it, and open oneself up for something divine to demonstrate itself. This is what happened for King. He became overwhelmed, he shared, by a sense of divinity that he had never felt in his entire life before. He shared pragmatically. The outer situation remained the same. In fact, his house will be bombed 3 times in the future. The outer situation remained the same, but God had given me an inner calm. When you truly know who you are and live from who you are, nothing that takes place in the world around you can ever take that from you. So 3 keys to practical courage. What's the first one? Don't be afraid to be afraid. The second one, be consistent. And the third, practical courage requires a practical faith. So just in a closing moment of prayerfulness, if you so care to join me and accept a prayer from a lion who is both cowardly and courageous. Let us become aware of any circumstance in our lives where first we are called to a greater authenticity, to acknowledge a feeling that we felt that perhaps we've been resisting or denying. Let us accept that now. And let us make a commitment to be consistent to our virtues and our values, to those ideals that we hold most sacred, to being those in our lives, especially when they do not appear around us. And lastly, may we commit to a practical faith that doesn't seek to manipulate or control our life in any way, shape, or form, but shows up to be a presence for that great light within us all. As we show up for this light, I know it shows up for us, that it radiates, it transforms, it transcends, it evolves, it grows, and it changes. Not with ferociousness, but indeed with that deep, sincere, authentic, and tender love, the most powerful force there is. We give thanks for it and allow it to be, and so it is.